You have probably planned a funeral before or attended one. Flowers, dark clothes, a slow procession, someone speaking too softly into a microphone. It feels ancient. It feels like it has always been this way. But the real answer is far stranger. For most of human history, there was no ceremony at all. No grave. No goodbye. Your ancient ancestors for millions of years simply walked away from their dead and never looked back. Bodies were left where they fell. No burial. No ritual. No grief you would recognize. Something changed, and figuring out when it changed and why tells you something uncomfortable about your own mind today. Start with the body. Around 300,000 years ago, early Homo sapiens were spreading across Africa, hunting, gathering, surviving in small bands. Death was constant. Predators, disease, childbirth, violence. A person could be alive at breakfast and gone by nightfall. And when they died, the evidence suggests something almost clinical happened next. The group moved on. The corpse was left exposed, the way a fallen tree is left exposed. Nature took it apart. That sounds cold to you. It should. But ask yourself something first. Why would burying a body even occur to anyone? A grave takes energy. Digging takes time. Time a hungry, exposed group of primates did not have to spare. So somewhere, something had to change in the way early humans understood death itself before they were willing to pay that cost. The oldest strong evidence for deliberate burial comes from a site called Qafzeh in what is now Israel, dated to roughly 100,000 years ago. Archaeologist Arella Hovers and her team found human remains positioned in ways that looked intentional, not accidental. Limbs arranged, a body placed in a shallow pit, not thrown, not abandoned. Placed, that word matters. Placement implies a decision, and a decision implies something was going on inside that person's head that had never gone on inside a human head before. Here's where it gets stranger. Around 50,000 years ago, deep in a cave in what is now northern Iraq, Neanderthals were burying their dead too. The site is called Shanidar. Archaeologist Ralph Solecki excavated it in the 1950s and found something that shocked him. Clusters of flower pollen surrounding one of the skeletons. For decades, this was called the flower burial, a suggestion that Neanderthals mourned their dead with something like a bouquet. Later researchers questioned whether the pollen came from burrowing rodents rather than mourners. The debate is still not settled, but even the more conservative reading of Shanidar shows something remarkable. Neanderthals, a separate human lineage that split from your own ancestors hundreds of thousands of years earlier, were also placing bodies deliberately into the earth. Two different kinds of humans, two different continents of experience, the same strange impulse. Think about how long it took to get from abandon the body to place the body in the ground. Not years, not centuries, hundreds of thousands of years. Homo sapiens as a species is roughly 300,000 years old. Burial does not show up clearly until you are already 2/3 of the way through that timeline. That is a strange gap. It means the physical brain capable of language, tool use, and complex social bonds existed for tens of thousands of years before it did anything resembling a funeral. Something else had to click into place first. Not intelligence alone, something closer to imagination. Consider what burial actually requires cognitively. You have to hold a picture in your mind of a person who is no longer moving, no longer breathing, and somehow still matters. You have to project that picture forward, into a future where you yourself might not exist either. Archaeologist Paul Pettit, who has spent decades studying Paleolithic burial practices across Europe, argues that this kind of symbolic thinking did not appear overnight. It built up gradually, through small acts. A body turned to face a particular direction. A stone placed under a head like a pillow. Ochre, a red pigment sprinkled across remains at sites in South Africa dating back over 70,000 years. None of these acts fed anyone. None of them helped anyone survive the next winter. They only make sense if the humans doing them believed on some level that the dead still deserved attention. So, what actually caused it? Here is the twist, and it is not what you expect. It probably was not love, at least not at first. Researchers like biologist Ajit Varki have proposed something colder and more useful. Varki argues that full self-awareness, the kind that lets you imagine your own death, would have been almost unbearable for early humans to carry around without some way of managing it. A creature smart enough to know it will die, but not equipped with a story to make that knowledge livable, might freeze, might stop taking risks, might stop hunting the dangerous animals, stop having children, stop functioning at all. Burial, in this view, was not primarily a tribute to the dead. It was a tool for the living, a way to put the body and the unbearable fact of mortality somewhere it could be contained, out of sight, out of smell, out of the part of the mind that could not stop staring at it. Does that sound too bleak? Consider the animals. You are not the only species that reacts to death. Jane Goodall documented chimpanzees sitting beside dead troop members for hours, grooming them, appearing agitated, refusing to leave. Elephants have been observed standing over the bones of dead relatives, touching them gently with their trunks, returning to the same spot years later. Comparative psychologist James Anderson has studied these responses across primates and found consistent patterns: increased vigilance, distress calls, a reluctance to abandon the body immediately. So the instinct to react to death is not uniquely human at all. What is unique to you is what came next, not just reacting. Building a ritual, turning a raw animal response into a repeated symbolic act, passed down and refined across generations. That shift from instinct to ritual might be the real birth of what you would call culture. A grave is not just a hole. It is a message sent forward in time to people who have not been born yet, saying, "This mattered. Remember it. No other species does that. No other species needed to, because no other species had a mind capable of imagining a future that included its own absence." Once that message existed, it started to spread and mutate the way every human idea does. Different groups buried their dead differently, and those differences became identity. A particular way of arranging a body became a signature of a particular people. Grave goods started appearing: tools, beads, animal bones, placed alongside the deceased as though the dead still needed them. At a site called Sunghir, in what is now Russia, dated to around 34,000 years ago, archaeologists found 2 children buried head to head, covered in thousands of carefully carved ivory beads. Each bead alone took hours to make. Multiply that by thousands, and you are looking at an almost unthinkable investment of labor for 2 people who could give nothing back. That is not survival behavior. That is something closer to devotion, expressed through the only language early humans had for it: objects, effort, and time. It is worth pausing on how radical this actually was in evolutionary terms. Every other trait that shaped early humans, sharper stone tools, better cooperation, more efficient hunting strategies, paid for itself immediately. It helped someone eat, or survive the night, or raise more children. Burial pays for nothing tangible. It costs calories, time, and risk, all spent on someone who has already stopped needing anything. And yet it persisted everywhere, across every human population that left evidence behind. That persistence is the real clue. Whatever burial was doing, it was doing something so important to the group that natural selection let the cost stand. And here's the part that should genuinely unsettle you. That same mental machinery, the one that first drove a human to dig a hole in the dirt 100,000 years ago, is still running inside your skull right now. Every time you avoid thinking about your own mortality, every time you distract yourself the moment the thought arrives, every time a funeral, a memorial post, a moment of silence gives you a container to put grief into so you can keep functioning afterward, you are running the same program your ancestors ran at Qafzeh. You have just swapped the shallow pit for a headstone, a hashtag, a photo slideshow set to music. Psychologists have a name for this today. Terror management theory, developed by researchers including Sheldon Solomon, Jeff Greenberg, and Tom Pischinsky, proposes that a huge amount of human behavior, from religion to nationalism to your career ambitions, is quietly shaped by the need to manage the awareness of death. You build things that outlast you. You seek meaning that feels permanent. You want to be remembered. None of that is irrational. It is the same instinct that placed flowers or maybe just pollen-covered soil over a body in a cave 50,000 years ago. The instinct to make death mean something because meaning is the only thing that makes it survivable to think about at all. There is one more piece of this that rarely makes it into the textbooks. Grief itself may have been the ignition point, not the byproduct. Before there was ritual, there was almost certainly raw, wordless attachment, the same kind you see in a chimpanzee refusing to leave a dead infant or an elephant lingering at a skeleton. That attachment did not disappear when the brain got bigger. It got more complicated. A human mind capable of memory, of imagining someone's voice, of replaying a conversation that will never happen again, does not just feel loss the way an animal feels the absence of a companion. It feels loss as a kind of unfinished story. And an unfinished story demands an ending. Burial, ritual, the placing of beads and ochre and stone may have been early humans writing that ending by hand because no other tool existed yet to close the loop. That need has not gone anywhere. You still feel it every time someone leaves your life and you are left holding a version of them that has nowhere to go, a voicemail you cannot delete, a conversation you replay looking for something you missed. Modern grief counselors describe this exact process, the search for a way to integrate loss into an ongoing sense of self without calling it archaeology. But it is archaeology. It is the same layer of the mind that once knelt over a body in a cave and decided, for reasons it could not fully explain even to itself, that walking away was no longer an option. So the next time you find yourself at a funeral, uncomfortable, unsure what to say, watching people you love try to put grief into words, remember what you are actually witnessing. Not a modern custom, not etiquette. You are watching the oldest continuous behavior your species ever invented, older than farming, older than writing, older than almost anything you would call civilization. 100,000 years of humans looking at death and refusing to let it be nothing. You have planned a funeral before, or you will. And when you do, you will not just be marking a loss. You will be doing the exact same thing a small group of humans did in a cave in Israel 100,000 years ago, staring at a body they did not know how to leave behind, and deciding, for the first time in the history of life on this planet, to place it gently into the ground instead of walking away.